Welcome to Unraveling the Unexplained. My name is Kat, and I am a longtime astral traveler and spirit consultant. This is my brother John.
Hello.
He is a longtime fan of the creepy and the paranormal. He has selected a video for me to watch and react to. I haven't seen it. What do we have today?
All right, so tonight we're checking out a fairly well-known cryptid, not as famous as some, but well-known enough that it's made its way into several types of media. So let's see what you have to say about it.
Let's get into it.
West Virginia is a beautiful state, cloaked in thickly forested mountains, broken up by deep and green river valleys. And as idyllic as that would sound, West Virginia actually harbors a very curious history, one that has introduced numerous stories of mysterious, otherworldly creatures said to have been sighted in the area. A history that has haunted residents of the state for hundreds of years. One particular event in 1952 is still a prominent piece of West Virginia folklore, and coincidentally, has also managed to wrangle its way into international pop culture. Known as the Flatwoods monster, the creature has become an icon among cryptid enthusiasts worldwide.
The Mystery Syndicate. I like it.
It's a good name.
It is a good name. And we will link this in the description.
Around 7 p.m. on September 12th, 1952, in Braxton County, West Virginia, 3 young schoolboys were playing outside when they witnessed an event that would ignite an international frenzy. Friends Edward and Fred May and Tommy Heiner were enjoying the last bit of daylight before going home for the night, when they watched in awe as a fiery object streaked across the darkening sky. They watched it land on a nearby hill on Mr. G. Bailey Fisher's farm. Shocked but excited by what they witnessed, they rushed to the May house to tell Mrs. May. Mrs. May was curious about the wild story, so she accompanied the boys to go take a look. Along the way, they were joined by 2 other local kids and a National Guardsman, Eugene Lemon. Lemon had his dog with him, and the group went to the Fisher farm to investigate. By the time the group arrived at the farm, darkness had fallen and the fog was beginning to creep in. Lemon's dog ran ahead of them but came back quickly, whimpering with his tail tucked between his legs. They traveled another quarter mile when they saw a red pulsating object off in the distance. From out of nowhere, a thick mist had materialized that hurt their eyes and burned their throats. It had a metallic, sulfuric smell. Instead of turning around and retreating, Lemon, being the quintessential soldier, bravely assumed the lead, armed with only a flashlight. He caught sight of 2 shining eyes peering out from under an oak tree and directed the light to illuminate them. What the group saw would become the subject of one of the most fascinating legends in American history, a creature that became known as the Flatwoods Monster. All 6 people in the group saw it clearly for several seconds. It was estimated to be 7 to 10 feet tall and appeared to be wearing a cloak of heavily folded black or green material. It had no visible legs and seemed to float. The arms were long and at the end were small claws. The face was shaped like a spade, with skin described as pale, fiery orange, red, or green. There was a hood that highlighted large glowing eyes, and when the flashlight illuminated the creature, it made an awful screeching sound and flew towards the group in a gliding or bounding manner. Then, it vanished. Terrified, the group scrambled back to the May residence, feeling overwhelmingly sick. The younger children complained of nausea and burning throats. Lemon vomited and suffered convulsions for the rest of the night. Not knowing what else to do, Mrs. May called the sheriff's office, but the sheriff, Robert Carr, was out investigating reports of a plane crash. Mrs. May then called the owner of the local newspaper, Mr. Lee Stewart. Stewart immediately went out and started interviewing witnesses. He collected reports from 20 other people who saw the fiery object streaking across the sky that night. Some witnesses claimed that their houses had been shaken and radio signals were disrupted. Sheriff Carr, a deputy, and Stewart finally went out to investigate the crash site. The sheriff and deputy said they did not see or smell anything unusual, while Stewart claimed that he noticed a sickening, burnt metallic odor hanging in the air. Since it was still dark, they left the site. The next morning, Stewart returned alone to the site. He saw 2 long skid marks in the grass and a black oily substance on the ground. He went back to his shop and printed the story. As soon as the story hit the public, paranormal investigators flocked to the town, interviewing the locals and combing the area for evidence. One such researcher, Gray Barker, not only interviewed witnesses, but also made tape recordings of their testimonies. He surveyed a 20-mile radius around the site. Barker first wrote about the incident in an article submitted to Fate magazine. Later, he published a book about it. After his investigation, he concluded that the experience was consistent with UFO and extraterrestrial activity. 2 other paranormal writers, Ivan T. Ho and Donald E. Kehoe, a so-called UFOologist, also visited the town. They performed their own investigation and claimed that the incident was probably an authentic case of alien contact. But what really happened that night? What did the group see on Fisher's farm? What made them sick? Well, naturally, there were plenty of skeptics who offered their own opinions of what could have happened. The United States Air Force verified that there was a meteor spotted in 3 different states, West Virginia included, on the night of September 12, 1952. The meteor spawned reports of plane crashes, which was what held Sheriff Carr's attention that night. Some people believe that the boys actually saw the meteor, and the red pulsating light at the crash site was an aircraft hazard beacon that would warn planes of the hill and farm. But none of that explained the noxious fumes that made the children sick, and that still lingered when Stewart returned to the site with the sheriff.
I mean, more importantly, if it was a plane crash, there would be a crashed plane there.
Yeah, you'd think the people searching would find wreckage of a plane.
Right.
And people and...
Right, more importantly, if there was a plane crash, there would be a crashed plane there. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts thus far?
Well, there's a couple of things that I noticed about it. First, they said that he did... My first thought was honestly that they seemed to have a lot of people that went up there and looked at it with them initially.
Yeah.
So I guess my first thought is that 1952 was a different time. Like, if you went to your neighbor today and was like, I think there's a red flash in the sky, any of our neighbors would be like, yeah, okay, closing the door now. You know?
Different time, different part of the country, different culture.
So my first thought was that it was a little odd that that many people went out there to begin with, but I guess, yeah, different time, different part of the country.
Yeah, like, this is more like kind of a countryside area, you know, you might know your neighbors well enough, and some local kids show up, you'd be like, yeah, I'll go check out whatever the heck crashed on my property.
The second thing that I noticed about it is that he said all of them saw the same thing, but really
there's some conflicting
information. Like, the skin color didn't seem the same to all of them or whatever.
Though that being said, that doesn't surprise me for a couple of potential reasons. 1, it's night. 2, there's obscuring fog. So conflicting lighting conditions can, you know, make you see slightly different shades. It's also possible that depending on what this entity was, different people could be perceiving it in slightly different ways.
Yeah. So it strikes me as interesting that not everybody perceived it in exactly the same way.
What I find interesting about it is, assuming this is real and assuming they were seeing this, the behavior of the entity and the appearance of it was a little unusual, at least compared to some of the other things. I mean, we've seen crab hand people so far.
I think there's. I mean, I'm prepared to withhold until I hear the rest of the information. Right. I don't like to make a judgment too soon before I've heard everything. I mean, plainly, you've watched the video before, though, so maybe you know something I don't. It's obviously not a plane crash, or there would have been debris there. You know what I
The
mean?
noxious fumes are an interesting bit to this, because I don't think I've actually seen that repeated in like other kind of encounters of this nature.
Yeah, the smell that was in the air is a little bit odd, and the response. You get the impression from some of these alien or UFO encounters that the whatever aliens they aren't any more familiar with what they're doing here
Yeah.
than we're familiar with what they're doing here.
Less intent, more reactionatory.
Right. This seems unintentioned.
Yeah.
You know, which is an interesting aspect. But let's see what the
else
rest
goes
of this
on?
has to say.
What was the mist that they saw? According to one source, the smell and physical effects described were consistent with unprotected contact with mustard gas. The Center for Disease Control labels sulfur mustard, or mustard gas, as a blistering agent that was used as a chemical weapon during wars, and has been used on unsuspecting military personnel and civilians alike. It is a thick, tar-like substance that can be spread through water, air, or even in solid form. Although exposure is usually not fatal, repeated exposure can cause physical damage to the lungs and even damage DNA, among other things. Every military recruit has to endure the gas chamber during basic training to gain an understanding of how it affects the body, but also as hands-on training for properly donning their gas masks. The gas burns all exposed skin, burns the eyes, nose, mouth, and throat. It can have a funny smell, like sulfur or garlic, or can even be odorless. Some exposed recruits get violently ill, but once the gas mask is properly adjusted, symptoms of exposure ease. The mask does nothing, however, for exposed skin. Perhaps this mysterious creature used a similar chemical as protection. It was reported that several of the people who were exposed to the toxic mist at the crash site ended up having problems with breathing and seizures for the rest of their lives. While that was the primary encounter with the Flatwoods monster, there were a couple other incidents worth noting. A week prior to the official incident on September 12th, a mother and her 21-year-old daughter had an encounter with a mist cloud that, quote, smelled awful. In fact, it affected the daughter so strongly that she was hospitalized for 3 weeks. And on the day after the sighting, on September 13th, a couple were driving along a road in nearby Frametown, West Virginia, when their car suddenly died. They got out and tried to restart it. The couple were then overcome by a putrid mist smelling of sulfur. A monster materialized from the darkness that resembled the Flatwoods monster, but had a lizard-human hybrid head. This particular creature came to be known as the Frametown monster. The Flatwoods monster has never been seen again, but that hasn't stopped the legends or erased the lore from local memory. In fact, it's done quite the opposite. A section at the Braxton County Visitor Center is dedicated to the legend in the form of a museum. The walls of the museum are lined with images, artist renderings, posters, t-shirts, and lanterns depicting the monster. Smith claims that the museum has become a hub for all things mysterious, such as UFOs and cryptids in West Virginia. A little more exposure never hurts, though. Smith has even started running media campaigns featuring what have become iconic, oversized wooden chairs made in the likeness of the Flatwoods monster. A local carpenter made the chairs and placed them around Braxton County. Smith's ad campaign invites tourists to climb up the stairs of the 10-foot-tall chairs for pictures on a legendary Braxy-themed throne. By sharing the photos on social media, the visitors are preserving history and keeping the legend alive. Long live Braxy. We are Mystery Syndicate. If you like what we do, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it. Is there more of it after
No.
that? It's just more. Okay. And I'll probably edit that down significantly. If you want to check out the whole video, we'll link the video in the description so you can go watch the entire thing. Please support the original creators. It matters so much. Every little view matters. So please follow that link and support that.
Check them out. They cover a lot of other stuff.
So this is, I'm not sure it falls into the cryptid category. It almost really classify it more as UFO, don't you think?
It's a little bit of both, because it's a UFO that was seen landing, and then a creature that may or may not have been an alien of some sort was encountered. It sort of blurs that line between those.
It doesn't necessarily look like a standard alien based on what they describe.
That's sort of what stands out about it. Yeah, it had a very distinct appearance.
Sort of a landing or something coming out of the sky. And I think I've told you before, I'm not sure I've said it on the channel before, that I'm not convinced that every UFO or whatever encounter that you're dealing with or that we're seeing is the same thing. Like, I'm not sure it's all the same species or even all the same phenomena. It just kind of comes off and gets interpreted that way, I think.
Because for us, it's all just weird stuff from the sky or seemingly from somewhere else.
This is an early accounting of it. I think this is like, what, 1952?
Yeah.
So this is going to be, before too much alien stuff is out there really giving everybody the same impression of what an alien looks like. So they're interpreting things in some kind of way. So I think that could be contributing to how...
It doesn't just appear like the standard gray.
Right. These people are definitely getting their own interpretation of what they saw rather than being influenced in any way by other interpretations of what aliens look like. This one kind of falls into that category of, like I was saying earlier, feeling unintentional.
Like this one wasn't here by intention, but more accident.
Well, yeah, I mean, the various kinds of interactions that you get reports of, it's strange because it all seems like very different. Some of them seem very intentioned. Like, yes, we're here to probe you, come with us. You know what I mean? When some of them seem like crashed and burned, like they can't even keep their ships in the sky or whatever. Yeah. And then some of them just seem like orbs that are chasing airplanes around. Right. So it feels like very different behavior you get from different instances of interaction.
So your impression is that it's not all the same thing.
My impression is, it's either that it's not all the same thing. I know I've talked to you before. I'm not sure I've said it yet on the channel or not. I don't necessarily think that these represent physical beings from another planet that are traveling light years in physical spaceships. I think it may be non-corporeal entities from another dimension that are trying to figure out how to force their way in to to manifest physically in our environment. They're aware that we're here and are trying to figure out how to mimic it, how to
be 3D.
Yeah, how to be 3D, how to mimic our technology of being human.
And it doesn't always work out that great for them.
Kind of the impression that I get is that they maybe necessarily our timelines don't match. So they may be coming through at different stages in their timeline, in different stages in our timeline. So you may get some earlier instances where they just seem like orbs shooting around or whatever.
Because that's all they could pull off.
Representing in their timeline an earlier stage of what they were attempting to do.
And then at certain points, maybe in our past, but their version of the future, they've gotten good enough that they can maybe get something a bit more physical, maybe manifest a form kind of maybe mimicking ours to a degree.
Right, they're coming through more in that format, trying to mimic the physical form, but it doesn't seem that they can actually maintain it for very long. Like they can manage to come through, but crash and burn, or they can't manage to maintain the form for very long.
Or there are unusual unintended side effects, like kind of a distortion or a mist that causes a bad smell, burning of the throat, irritation.
Right, and they're not aware of that being noxious to us. Maybe they didn't even know it was going to be a side effect of doing that. You know. I really get the feeling of like a progression of experimental stuff happening, but maybe their progression looks a little all over the place to us because it's happening. They're coming through at different points in our timeline.
Yeah.
Makes sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
So, and I think maybe that's why some of the abduction scenarios, the probing scenarios, if they're trying to force their way through in physical forms that aren't working out very well, what is it about our physical forms that does contain consciousness stable in this 3D reality? Makes sense.
Yeah.
So this to me, it feels like one of those earlier attempts where experimentation was done, but not necessarily successfully.
And possibly more than once, because like the video was saying, there
Mhm.
was that earlier incident with the mom and daughter running into the mist, and maybe that
Yeah.
was a bit earlier, and then you had this incident, and then the couple on the road that were broke down, but they again ran into that mist again with the
Mhm.
creature coming out of it. Maybe for this particular thing they were trying to do, the mist is a component of like how they tried to maintain physical form. Like maybe they could maintain their form if they also created a environment that was a bit more easier for them to do it in. Maybe that's what the mist was supposed to be, a imposition of some of their environment into our environment.
It could also represent a side effect of pushing through and creating a 3D thing for them, and maybe that's why you get, usually craft is coming way up in the sky, not down in and around people so much anymore, and it could be because there was, a toxic side effect for
Biological.
biologicals. They don't try to approach it or do it in that way anymore. They tend to manifest higher up in the atmosphere, either that or below the surface of the water, and then interact from there because the point of entry creates a noxious fume that's not healthy for the biologicals involved.
Yeah.
So to me, it looks like and feels like and represents
One of these
one of the
mid-stage
stages of
experiments
one of the stages of
of them trying to
experimentation.
manifest here.
Mhm.
Makes sense
That's
to me.
sort of how I feel about it. I don't know. Feel free to let us know what you think. If you think I'm crazy, if you think it makes sense, drop us a comment. Let us know if you have videos that you think would be cool for us to check out. Let us know what those would be. We will link this video in the description. Go check it out. You can also send us emails at unravelmyexperience@gmail. If you have a spooky or creepy experience you'd like to send us to have us take a look at and maybe feature on the channel. Anything else?
I think that about covers it.
Yeah, like and subscribe if you dig it, and we'll be back with some more Unraveling the Unexplained.
Have a good evening.
Bye.